The knock on her door wasn't a request, it was a demand. Outside, a violent storm was trying to tear the world apart, but the man who collapsed on her doorstep was already bleeding. He was a stranger, just a shadow against the lightning, his face a mask of pain. Sophie Hayes, a small-town waitress, did the only thing she knew how. She showed kindness. She dragged him inside, stitched his wound, and saved his life. She thought she was sheltering a drifter from the storm. She had no idea she was hiding Marcus Thorne, a feared billionaire, a man whose enemies were far more dangerous than any hurricane, and by saving him, she had just put herself directly in their path. The rain didn't just fall, it attacked. Sophie Hayes pressed her forehead against the cool, rattling glass of her cottage window, watching the Atlantic Ocean try to reclaim the small town of Osprey Cove. This wasn't a storm. It was a nor'easter with a vendetta, a swirling vortex of wind and water that had already knocked out the power twice. The lights in her tiny kitchen flickered again, casting long, dancing shadows, before finally surrendering to the dark. "Damn it," she muttered, pulling her worn cardigan tighter. The gloom was immediate, broken only by the frantic flashes of lightning that illuminated the churning, white-capped waves. At 28, Sophie's life was a study in routine. Wake up, pull on the unflattering beige uniform for the Salty Spatula diner, serve greasy eggs and bitter coffee for 10 hours, come home, count her tips, and stare at the dream bakery folder, a collection of recipes, business plans, and supplier quotes she'd been building for 5 years. She was a woman waiting for her life to start, stuck in the prologue. Tonight, the routine was broken. The diner had closed early, the entire town battening down the hatches. Sophie's cottage, perched on a rocky outcrop just outside the main village, felt terribly isolated. The wind screamed like a living thing, a banshee wailing at her windows. She was making a small fortress of blankets on her sofa when she heard it. Thud, thud, thud. She froze. It wasn't the sound of a branch. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate. It was a knock. Sophie's heart hammered against her ribs. Who would be out in this? The roads were flooded. The main bridge was probably closed. She grabbed the heavy iron fireplace poker, her knuckles white. Thud, thud, thud. This time it was followed by a heavy slump against the wood, as if a body had fallen. Fear warred with a deeper, more ingrained compassion. She crept toward the door, peering through the peephole. It was useless. The lens was obscured by a sheet of driving rain. "Who's there?" she shouted, her voice trembling. A low groan was her only answer, barely audible over the howl of the storm. I'm calling the police!" She tried again, knowing it was a hollow threat. The phone lines were almost certainly down. The groaning stopped. There was only the wind. And then, a terrifying silence. "Oh, hell," Sophie whispered. She couldn't leave someone to die on her doorstep, storm or no storm. With the poker held high, she unbolted the deadbolt. The wind ripped the door from her grasp, slamming it open against the interior wall with a crack. Rain and sea spray instantly flooded the entryway. And there he was. He was a heap of expensive, soaked black fabric on her welcome mat. He tried to push himself up, looked at her with eyes that were startlingly clear and intense, even in the gloom, and then collapsed forward into the cottage. Sophie dropped the poker, slamming the door shut against the storm's fury. She dragged the deadbolt back into place, her entire body shaking. The man was face down on her rug. He was large, with broad shoulders that strained his tailored jacket, a piece of clothing that clearly didn't belong in Osprey Cove. "Hey," she said, kneeling beside him. "Hey, can you hear me?" She touched his shoulder to roll him over, and her hand came back wet. She glanced at her palm, expecting rainwater. It was sticky and dark. Even in the dim emergency light of her wind-up lantern, she knew exactly what it was. Blood. She rolled him onto his back. He was younger than she first thought, maybe mid-30s. His face was all sharp angles and harsh lines, now pale and drawn with pain. A dark, blossoming stain was spreading across the side of his expensive-looking grey shirt, just beneath his ribs. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You're bleeding." He groaned, his hand weakly gripping his side. "Please," he rasped, his voice a low rumble. "Just inside. No hospitals. No. Cops." His eyes fluttered open again, pinning her. They were a cold, piercing grey, like the storm itself. In that moment, he didn't look like a victim. He looked like a command. Sophie, the waitress who dreamed of baking cupcakes, found herself nodding. Okay. No cops, but you're bleeding all over my floor. Let's get you to the sofa." He was heavy, a dead weight of muscle and wet wool. She grunted, hooking her arms under his, and dragged him the few feet to her worn, floral print couch. He fell onto it with a gasp, his face twisting in pain. "I need to see the wound," she said, her voice firmer now. The shock was fading, replaced by a kind of frantic practicality. This was just like the time old Mr. Henderson had cut his arm on the diner's meat slicer. Just. With more rain and a much scarier man. "Jacket," he muttered. She peeled the soaked jacket off him. It probably cost more than her car. She tossed it aside, and then hesitated at his shirt. "I'm going to have to cut this." He just nodded, his jaw clenched tight. Sophie grabbed her sewing scissors, the sharpest thing she owned, and cut the fabric away. The sight made her stomach lurch. It wasn't a clean cut. It was messy, torn. But it wasn't the wound that shocked her. It was the other things. His abdomen was a roadmap of faded white scars, pale against his tanned, athletic skin. This was not a man who lived a quiet life. The wound itself was just above his hip. It was deep, bleeding sluggishly, but it didn't look like a bullet. Maybe he'd fallen on a piece of rebar or a knife. "What happened to you?" she asked, grabbing the first aid kit from under her bathroom sink. "Car trouble," he panted, his eyes closed. "Skidded. Hit a fence post." It was a terrible lie. Sophie knew it instantly. A fence post wouldn't leave this kind of wound, and it wouldn't explain the utter lack of mud on his Italian leather shoes. But he was bleeding, and the storm was raging, and he was here. "Right," Sophie said, pulling out antiseptic wipes and gauze. "A fence post. Well, you're lucky. Looks like it missed anything vital. But this is going to hurt." "Get on with it," he ground out. She cleaned the wound. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, but a single bead of sweat rolled down his temple. His control was terrifying. As she worked, applying pressure, her fingers brushed against something hard at his waistband. Tucked into the back of his pants was the cold, hard steel of a handgun. Sophie's breath hitched. His eyes snapped open, locking onto hers. The silence in the room was suddenly louder than the storm. He wasn't just a man in trouble. He was trouble itself. "I'm licensed," he huffed, the lie catching in his pained breath. "Protection." Sophie just stared at him. She finished taping the bandage, her hands moving on autopilot. She should be screaming. She should be running out into the storm. But she didn't. She just pulled the Afghan off the back of the chair and draped it over him. "You need rest," she said, her voice a flat, hollow sound. "We can talk about the fence post in the morning." She retreated to the kitchen, her back to him, and leaned against the counter, her entire body shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The fireplace poker felt like a toothpick. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, a bleeding man with a gun and a dozen faded scars was sleeping on her sofa. Sophie Hayes's routine, quiet life was officially over. Sophie didn't sleep. She sat in her rickety wooden kitchen chair, nursing a cup of cold tea, watching the man on her couch. The storm provided a chaotic soundtrack to the tense vigil. Every flash of lightning painted his face in stark relief, making the sharp planes of his cheeks and the dark stubble on his jaw seem almost menacing. He was in and out of consciousness, restless and feverish. In his delirium he muttered. The words were disjointed, fragments of a life she couldn't possibly comprehend. The breach. Kincaid. Stupid, stupid move. Not the asset. Secure the data. 5 billion. Liquidated. He won't see it coming. The words meant nothing to her, but the tone, cold, clipped, and utterly ruthless, sent a chill through her. This was not the talk of a man who'd had an accident. It was the talk of a man who caused them. Around 3 a.m., his fever spiked. He thrashed, kicking the Afghan off, and the movement pulled his bandage loose. He was bleeding again. With a sigh that was half fear, half resignation, Sophie went to him. "Hey," she said softly, touching his forehead. He was burning up. "Hey, you need to hold still. Your fence post wound is bleeding." His eyes flew open, but they were unfocused. He grabbed her wrist, his grip like a steel trap. "Where is it?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. "Where's what?" Sophie tried to pull away, but his grip was unyielding. "The package. The drive." He looked around, disoriented. "My jacket. It's over there," she said, pointing to the soaked heap by the door. "It's drenched, and you are bleeding. Let go." He released her, as if her skin had suddenly turned hot. He watched her, breathing hard as she retrieved the jacket. It was heavy, a high-end brand she didn't recognize. "There's nothing in the pockets but a phone, I think. It's broken." She handed him a sleek, black object. It wasn't a normal smartphone. It was thicker, heavier, and now its screen was a spiderweb of cracks. He stared at it, and a look of pure, cold fury passed over his features. He'd lost. Then he looked at his watch. Sophie had noticed it earlier. It wasn't a Timex. It was a complex web of dials and gears under a crystal face, set in dark, polished metal. It looked less like a timepiece, and more like a piece of intricate machinery. Even to her untrained eye, it screamed expensive. "What's your name?" he asked. His voice was clearer now, the fever receding slightly, replaced by a sharp-edged suspicion. "Sophie. Sophie Hayes." She retrieved the first aid kit. "And you?" He hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. "Adam. Adam Smith." Sophie almost laughed. "Adam Smith. Right. As in, John Doe was too obvious?" A small, humorless smile touched his lips. "Something like that." He winced as he tried to sit up, and this time he let her help. "You need antibiotics," she said, dabbing at the wound. "This is already starting to look infected. I have some amoxicillin from a root canal I never finished." "No," he said, his voice firm. "No doctors, no hospitals. Just give me what you have." She cleaned and redressed the wound, her hands surprisingly steady. The proximity to him was strange. He smelled of rain, metal, and something else, an expensive, musky cologne that was fighting a losing battle with the antiseptic. "You're good at this," he observed, his grey eyes tracking her movements. "I'm a waitress," she replied, taping the gauze down. "You learn to patch up short-order cooks who get friendly with the bacon press." "A waitress?" he assessed her. He looked at her small, clean cottage, the worn-out books on her shelves, the dream bakery folder sitting on her kitchen table. His gaze lingered on the folder. "What's that?" Nothing, Sophie said, suddenly defensive. My business. Bakery, he read from the cover. He leaned back, a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. You want to open a bakery? It's a stupid dream, she said, gathering the bloody rags. Why? Because, she snapped, her patience worn thin by fear and exhaustion. It takes money. A lot of money. The kind of money that people like me don't ever see. And people like you, well, I don't know what you are, Adam, but you're not from around here. He was quiet for a long time, just watching her. The intensity of his stare made her feel like she was under a microscope. You saved my life, he said finally, the words sounding foreign on his lips. You were bleeding on my rug, she countered. I didn't have much of a choice. You always have a choice, he said, and the words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. You could have left me outside. You could have called the sheriff. Why didn't I? She asked, more to herself than to him. He didn't answer. He just settled back onto the sofa, his eyes never leaving her, until the exhaustion and blood loss finally pulled him back under. Sophie retreated to the kitchen again, but this time she opened the Dream Bakery folder. She looked at her careful, hopeful plans, and then at the man on her couch. He was from a world that ate dreams like hers for breakfast, a world of billion-dollar deals, Patek Philippe watches, and apparently getting stabbed or shot by rivals named Kincaid. And he was right. She had made a choice. As the first grey light of dawn began to break through the storm clouds, she had a terrible, sinking feeling that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The storm trapped them for 36 hours. The wind finally died down by the next evening, but the rain was relentless, turning Osprey Cove into an island. The bridge was flooded, the roads impassable. The power remained stubbornly off. For a day and a half, Sophie's world shrank to the four walls of her cottage, the candlelight and the dangerous man on her sofa. He healed with an unnatural speed. By the next morning, the fever was gone, and the colour had returned to his face. He was still weak, but the raw, coiled energy was back. He was a predator forced to rest, and it made him irritable. Adam, she refused to call him that in her head, settling on sofa guy, was a terrible patient and a worse houseguest. He was quiet, but his presence filled the small space. He'd sit, staring into the fireplace where she'd managed to get a small fire going, his jaw set, his mind clearly miles, and millions of dollars away. He asked for her phone. She handed over her old, cracked smartphone. He looked at it with something close to disdain, but spent an hour methodically trying to get a signal, holding it up to the window, before giving up. Useless, he muttered. It's all I've got, Sophie said, bristling. Sorry it's not whatever that broken thing in your pocket was. A sat phone, he said, not looking at her. And it's not broken. It's fried. Someone used a targeted EMP. That's why the chopper went down. Sophie stopped stirring the canned soup she was heating over the fire. Chopper? I thought you hit a fence post. His eyes snapped to hers. The lie had been forgotten. He was cornered, and for a second she saw the feared part of him. His expression was cold, flat, and appraising. He was calculating. The fence post, he said slowly, was after the helicopter crash-landed. I was a passenger. A helicopter? In that storm? Who would be stupid enough to fly in this? Someone who had to be somewhere, he said, dismissing her. They ate the canned tomato soup in silence. Sophie watched him. He ate with a strange, precise etiquette, even sitting on a floral sofa, eating out of a chipped mug. So, Kincaid, Sophie said, deciding to push. Is he the one who fried your phone? The spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. What did you say? His voice was lethally soft. You were talking in your sleep. Fever, she explained quickly, her heart rate kicking up. You said Kincaid and stupid move, and something about $5 billion. He set the mug down. The air crackled. He wasn't just a man with a gun. He was a man who talked about billions while bleeding. You will forget that name, he said. It wasn't a request. Fine, Sophie said, matching his cold tone. Forget Kincaid. Forget the billions. Forget the helicopter. But you're in my house, Adam. You owe me a truth. One truth. What really happened? He stared at her, the silence stretching. She expected him to lie again, to threaten her. Instead, he gave her a piece of it. I was betrayed, he said, his voice flat. By a business partner. He arranged for my accident during the storm, hoping the crash would be blamed on the weather. He gets the company, the deal, everything. And the wound. The pilot, he said, his eyes dark. He was on the payroll. We survived the crash. He tried to finish the job. I was faster. Sophie swallowed. Did you? He won't be a problem, Adam said. The implication was clear. He had a gun. The pilot did not. I walked for miles. Your light was the first one I saw. My God, she whispered. This was real. This wasn't a TV drama. Before she could process this, a new sound cut through the rain. A heavy, rumbling engine. Headlights swept across her living room window. Adam was off the couch in a silent flash, pain forgotten. He grabbed his gun from the jacket, where he'd put it to dry, and flattened himself against the wall by the door, gun raised. The speed was inhuman. Who is it? He hissed. I don't know, Sophie whispered, her heart in her throat. A loud, friendly knock. Sophie! You in there, kid? It's Miller. Sophie sagged in relief. It's the sheriff, she whispered to Adam. Sheriff Miller. He's just checking on residents. Adam's eyes narrowed. Get rid of him. And Sophie. His voice dropped, the cold steel of the gun barrel suddenly in his tone. If you say one word about me, I'll know. The threat was terrifyingly real, but it was the look in his eyes that was worse, a desperate, cornered animal look. She nodded, her hands shaking. She went to the door. 1 second, Sheriff. The lock is stuck. She took a deep breath, composed her face into one of scared but relieved resident, and opened the door. Sheriff Miller, a large, weather-beaten man with a kind face, stood on her porch, dripping. Sophie, thank heavens. We were worried about you out here. You all right? Power's out everywhere. I'm fine, Sheriff. Just spooked by the storm, she said, forcing a smile. Miller's gaze went past her, into the dark cottage. Heard a crash out this way earlier. You got company? Sophie's blood ran cold. He saw Adam through the window. What? She tried to laugh. No, just me in the wind. I have the fire going. Maybe that's what you see. Miller looked at her, his expression unreadable in the flashing blue and red lights of his cruiser. He knew she was lying. But why? Yeah, he said slowly. Maybe that's it. Well, you stay safe. We're trying to clear the bridge. Shouldn't be more than another day. You got enough food? I'm fine. Thank you, Sheriff. He tipped his hat, gave her one last, long look, and walked back to his truck. Sophie closed the door, her knees weak. She turned around. Adam was still in the shadows, the gun still in his hand. He saw you, she stammered. When he pulled up, the headlights, he saw your shadow. Adam stepped into the light. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the retreating taillights of the police cruiser. His face was a mask of cold, calculating rage. "He didn't see a shadow," Adam said, his voice dangerously low. "He was looking. He wasn't checking on a resident. He was hunting." What do you mean?" Adam finally looked at her, and the last traces of the wounded Adam Smith were gone. This was the man who survived. "That sheriff isn't on the town's payroll. He's on Kincaid's." The sheriff's visit shattered the fragile truce of the cottage. The last 12 hours of their confinement were spent in a state of paranoid silence. Adam, she still didn't know his real name, didn't rest. He paced, stopping at the window, checking the perimeter, his gun now tucked into his waistband, where he could always feel it. He was a caged wolf, and Sophie was locked in with him. He'd made her describe Sheriff Miller's cruiser, the logo on the side, how he'd acted. He was building a puzzle she couldn't see. "He's not a cop," Adam stated, more to himself than to her. "Or he is, and he's dirty. Kincaid loves to buy local law. It's efficient. He must have Kincaid's men sweeping the coast. They'd be looking for wreckage or a body." "A body," Sophie repeated, feeling sick. "Mine," he said flatly, "and when they find you instead, they'll have questions." "What do I tell them?" "Nothing. You saw nothing. You heard nothing. You sheltered no one. Your life depends on that lie, Sophie." He finally looked at her, his grey eyes pinning her. "I've brought this danger to your door. I'm sorry for that. But you are in it now." The apology sounded stiff, as if the words were new to him. By the next morning, the rain had stopped. A watery, bruised sun tried to break through the clouds. The world was ear-normal, quiet. Too quiet. Adam was already at the window when the first vehicle appeared. It wasn't the sheriff. It was a black, military-grade SUV. A Cadillac Escalade, armored by the look of it, that growled up her flooded driveway. Adam didn't aim his gun. He tucked it away and opened the cottage door. "They're here." "Who?" Sophie asked, panicked. "Kincaid's men." "Mine." A man in a sharp suit and an earpiece got out, surveyed the scene with a professional's cold gaze, and opened the back door. Adam turned to Sophie. The cottage, which had been his sanctuary, suddenly seemed small and shabby to him. He pulled a thick wad of cash from his jacket, a money clip. It held at least $10,000 in hundreds. He shoved it at her. "For the trouble. For the food. For the lies you're going to have to tell." Sophie looked at the money, then at him. She felt a white-hot flash of anger. After the fear, the blood, the lies, the terror, he thought he could just pay her, like a waitress getting a tip. She slapped his hand away. The money scattered onto the floor. "I am not one of your employees, Adam. I didn't patch you up for money. I did it because I don't know why, but not for that. Get out." He stared at the money on the floor, then at her. The surprise on his face was genuine. It was clear no one had refused him anything in a very, very long time. A slow, strange smile of respect touched his lips. "You have spirit, Sophie Hayes," he said. He bent down, not to pick up the money, but to retrieve a single business card from his wallet. He wrote a number on the back. "This is my personal driver. The card is irrelevant. The number on the back is not. It's a burner. It will only work once. If that sheriff comes back, if anyone comes back asking questions you can't answer, you call it. They will find you. They will get you out. And what? Take me to another one of your safe houses? I'll take you anywhere you want to go," he said. "A new life. A new city." He glanced at her bakery folder. "A new bakery." "I don't want a bakery from you," she said, her voice shaking. "I want my life back." "I'm afraid," he said, his voice soft. "That's the one thing I can't give you." He walked out the door without looking back, got into the Escalade, and was gone. Sophie stood in the doorway, watching the SUV disappear. She sank to her knees, her entire body finally succumbing to the exhaustion. She looked at the bloodstains on her rug, the medical waste, the scattered $100 bills. It was like a dream. She spent the day cleaning. She scrubbed the floor, bleached the rags, burned the bloody bandages in her fireplace. She hid the money in her dream bakery folder. A heavy, dirty secret. By the time evening fell, the cottage was spotless. It was as if he had never been there. She went to work at the Salty Spatula the next morning. The town was buzzing with storm stories. "You hear?" Marge, the diner's owner, said as she poured Sophie a coffee. "Some big shot's helicopter went down off the point. Coast Guard's been out all night." Sophie's hand trembled, rattling the cup in its saucer. "Oh?" "Yeah, nothing on the news about who yet. Just a rumor. Probably just some rich fisherman." Sophie went about her shift, her mind a million miles away. She was refilling the ketchup bottles at the counter when the breaking news alert flashed across the small, greasy TV mounted in the corner. "We interrupt this program with a developing story," the anchor said. "Thorne Dynamics, the global conglomerate, has just confirmed its CEO, Marcus Thorne, is missing." A picture flashed on the screen. It was him. It was Adam, but he wasn't wounded, pale, and lying on a sofa. He was in a perfectly tailored suit, stepping off a private jet. The caption read, "Marcus Thorne. Feared, reclusive, ruthless." Often called the Wolf of the Markets, the reporter continued, Thorne was en route to finalize a hostile takeover of Kincaid Industries when his private helicopter, a Sikorsky S-76, lost contact during the storm. Sources say foul play is suspected. Sophie dropped the tray of ketchup bottles. They shattered on the floor, splattering red everywhere like a fresh wave of blood. Marge rushed over. "Sophie, good Lord, you're white as a sheet. You okay?" Sophie couldn't breathe. Adam Smith wasn't just a man in trouble. He was Marcus Thorne, not just a billionaire. The Billionaire. A man so feared, his nickname was the Wolf, and she had saved his life and lied to a corrupt cop for him. And he had her, a small-town waitress, tangled up in his war with a man named Kincaid. A customer at the counter, a local fisherman, grunted. "Marcus Thorne, good riddance. That man is pure poison. My brother worked at a plant Thorne bought. Liquidated, he called it. Put 5,000 people out of work a week before Christmas. I hope they never find him." Sophie looked at the broken bottles, the red mess on the floor, and the cold, predatory face of Marcus Thorne on the TV. She wasn't an angel who had saved a life. She was an accomplice who had just saved a monster. Life in Osprey Cove was supposed to return to normal. The storm passed, the bridge reopened, and the Salty Spatula was busy with utility workers and insurance adjusters. But for Sophie, normal had ceased to exist. Every customer who walked through the door was a potential threat. Every car that slowed down on her street made her heart stop. She lived in the shadow of Marcus Thorne. The news was dominated by him. He was, officially, missing and presumed dead. His company, Thorne Dynamics, saw its stock plummet. The media painted a portrait of a ruthless corporate raider, a man who devoured competitors and asset-stripped companies, leaving communities in ruins. The fisherman at the diner was right. The man was despised. And then, just as suddenly, he was back. A week after she'd last seen him, a grainy cell phone video surfaced. It showed Marcus Thorne, looking thin and haggard, but very much alive, walking into the Thorne Dynamics headquarters in New York, flanked by a phalanx of private security. The narrative changed overnight. He wasn't dead. He was victorious. The stock shot up. News anchors scrambled. "The Wolf survives," one headline blared. "Kincaid Industries buyout finalized. CEO Robert Kincaid under investigation by the SEC." He'd won. The man she'd pulled from the rain had won his $5 billion war. Sophie felt a strange mix of relief and bitterness. He was alive. The danger, perhaps, was over. But he never called. The burner phone number he'd given her felt like a taunt. He had returned to his world of Bombardier Global 7500s and Gulfstream G650 jets, a world so high up he couldn't even see her little cottage from his altitude. He had used her cottage, her medical supplies, her lies, and then he had disappeared, leaving only a pile of dirty money she hadn't touched. About 2 weeks after the storm, a man in a crisp $1,000 suit walked into the Salty Spatula. He sat at Sophie's counter, ordered a black coffee, and didn't open the menu. "Sophie Hayes?" he asked. "Yeah. Can I get you anything else?" "My name is Arthur Covington," he said, sliding a business card to her. "Covington, Swain and Partners. I'm an attorney. I represent an anonymous benefactor, an investment group that has taken a particular interest in Osprey Cove's post-storm revitalization." Sophie's hands stilled on the coffee pot. "Okay. My client has purchased the old derelict building on Main Street, the one that used to be the Maritime Bank." Sophie knew it. It was a beautiful, brick-fronted building in the center of town, and it was right next to the empty lot she had marked in her Dream Bakery folder. "That's nice," Sophie said, her voice wary. "My client is aware of your culinary ambitions," Covington continued, his voice a smooth monotone. "They have instructed me to inform you that the building, along with a full, prepaid renovation contract and a $200,000 equipment and startup budget, has been transferred to a new LLC. You are the sole proprietor." Sophie just stared at him. "Congratulations, Miss Hayes. You're the owner of the Dream Bakery, I believe it's called." He placed a thick, leather-bound folder on the counter. "All the documents. You just need to sign." He'd bought her. He hadn't called. He hadn't asked. He'd just bought her. He'd bought her silence. He'd bought her dream. The anger was so potent it made her shake. "Tell your client," she said, her voice dangerously low, "that I am not for sale. I don't want his building. I don't want his blood money." Covington didn't even blink. My client anticipated this reaction. He asked me to convey a message. He leaned in slightly. He asked me to tell you that this is not a gift. It is restitution for the damage to your door, the stress, and the complications. He considers it closing a debt. "A debt," she scoffed. "He also asked me to tell you," the lawyer added, his eyes devoid of emotion, "that he appreciates your spirit, and that he hopes you use this to build something, because the world is better at building than you are at scrubbing bloodstains." His words. That hit her. He knew she'd cleaned it all away. "And if I still say no? Then the building sits empty, Ms. Hayes, a monument to a debt unpaid. He will not take it back. It's in your name. You can let it rot, or you can build your dream. As he put it, she has a choice. She always has a choice." The lawyer finished his coffee, left a $50 bill on the counter, and walked out. Sophie was left holding the keys to her entire future, and she'd never felt more trapped. She didn't sign the papers. Not yet. She went home, furious, and threw the leather folder into a closet, The next day, the real complication arrived. Sophie was walking home from her shift, the sun setting, when a nondescript sedan pulled up beside her. Not a black SUV, just a grey Ford. The passenger window rolled down. The man inside wasn't a lawyer. He was large, with a broken nose and eyes that were too small for his face. Sophie Hayes? She stopped. Who's asking? Just a friend. I'm looking for information. He smiled, and it was the least friendly expression she had ever seen. I'm working for Mr. Kincaid. You might have heard of him. He's looking for a friend, a guy named Thorne. Sophie's blood turned to ice. He went missing around here a few weeks back, the man continued, his voice casual. During the storm, we heard a rumor that someone might have seen him, someone local, maybe given him a hand. I don't know what you're talking about, Sophie said, her voice a reedy whisper. See, we know he was here, the man said, the smile dropping. We know his chopper went down just off the point, and we know he didn't just disappear. He's alive, which means somebody helped him. He tapped a photo on his phone and held it up. It was a grainy shot, but unmistakable. It was her cottage. Sheriff Miller said he saw a light on, said he came by, said you seemed nervous. Sheriff Miller. The dirty cop. I was nervous, Sophie stammered. The storm was terrible. Was it? The man's eyes raked over her. You're a bad liar, sweetheart. Here's the deal. You tell us what you know, where he went, who picked him up, what he said, and Mr. Kincaid makes it worth your while. A lot more than Thorne paid you. He didn't pay me anything. I don't know him. The man sighed. He pulled something from his pocket, a small silver cufflink, shaped like a wolf's head. This is Mr. Kincaid's personal insignia. He's very unhappy, and when he's unhappy, people get hurt. We know you're lying, Sophie. Miller saw him. He saw the man's shadow through your window. He just didn't realize who it was until after Thorne reappeared in New York. The man leaned out the window. You tell me, right now, or we're going to have a longer conversation, somewhere more private. Sophie was shaking, tears of terror blurring her vision. She looked at the man, at the photo of her house, at the coming dark. She was well and truly caught. She did the only thing she could. She ran. She ran, deaf to the man's shouts, and fumbled in her pocket, not for her house key, for the burner phone, the card Marcus Thorne had given her. She sprinted into the woods behind her cottage, her lungs burning, and dialed the number. It rang once. A crisp, professional voice answered. Yes? My name is Sophie Hayes, she screamed, sobbing. He said to call. He said you'd find me. They're here. Kincaid's men. They're at my house. There was a half-second pause. Stay on the line, Ms. Hayes. We have your location. Do not move. A team is inbound. The voice on the phone was unnervingly calm. Ms. Hayes, I need you to confirm your location. Are you in the woods, northwest of your primary residence? Yes. I'm behind the big oak tree, Sophie stammered, huddled against the bark, trying to control her panicked breaths. She could hear the man from the car crashing through the underbrush, calling her name. Good. Stay hidden. A local asset is 3 minutes out. A primary extraction team is 10 minutes out. But I need you to do something for me, Sophie. Can you see the man? He's in the yard. He's looking around the shed. Good. Does he have a vehicle? A grey Ford sedan. It's on the road. Excellent, the voice said, as if she'd just given him a positive weather report. Remain calm. We'll handle the rest. Who are you? I'm Mr. Thorne's head of security. My name is Helen, and I'm about to take out your trash. The line went dead. Sophie squeezed her eyes shut, praying. She heard the man shout again, closer this time. "Come on, bitch! You can't hide from me!" Then, from the main road, she heard the squeal of tires. Not the growl of a big SUV, but the roar of a high-performance engine. A car door slammed. "Hey!" the man in the yard yelled. "This is private property!" A new voice, a woman's voice, cold and clear, cut through the twilight. "I'm aware. You're trespassing." "Who the hell are you?" Kincaid's man snarled. "I'm the person your boss, Robert Kincaid, sent you to find," the voice said. "But you found me instead, and I'm not as accommodating as the homeowner." Sophie heard a scuffle, a single dull thwack, like a heavy object hitting flesh, followed by a muffled groan and the sound of a large body hitting the ground. Silence. Sophie held her breath for a full 30 seconds. "Ms. Hayes, you can come out now. The threat is neutralized." Sophie crept out from behind the tree. A woman stood in her yard, silhouetted against the grey sedan. She was tall, impossibly elegant in a black pantsuit, and was wiping her hands with a sanitizer wipe. Kincaid's man was slumped on the ground, unconscious, a zip tie already securing his hands behind his back. "Helen," Sophie whispered. "We need to go," Helen said, not unkindly, but with absolute authority. She tossed a small device onto the unconscious man's chest. "That's a tracker and a recorder. The local police, the real ones, will be here in 5, responding to an anonymous tip about a prowler. By then we'll be gone." "Gone? Gone where?" "Mr. Thorne's plane is waiting at the regional airport in Portland. You're not safe here anymore." I can't just leave. My job. My house." "Your house has been under surveillance since Miller first saw Mr. Thorne. Your job is irrelevant. Get your coat." "And," Helen added, gesturing to the unconscious man, "I'd forget about the bakery for now. Mr. Kincaid plays for keeps." Sophie's life, the one she'd so carefully curated, evaporated in that single moment. Numbly, she walked into her cottage, grabbed her purse, her dream bakery folder, and the jacket off the hook. She didn't look back. The car Helen was driving was an unmarked, absurdly fast Audi. They were at the small private airfield in Portland in under an hour, blowing past security gates that opened for them without question. And there it was. Not a small plane. It was a Dassault Falcon Atex, a sleek, predatory-looking jet, its engines already whining. "He's here?" Sophie asked, her stomach churning. "Mr. Thorne is in New York," Helen said, guiding her up the stairs. "But he requests your presence. He's very concerned." The interior of the jet was a cream-coloured leather utopia. It was silent, smooth, and smelled like money. Sophie, in her waitress uniform and sneakers, felt like a stray dog in a palace. She sat in a chair that was softer than her bed. A flight attendant offered her champagne. She asked for water. They landed in New York, where a black sedan drove them, directly onto the tarmac and into the heart of Manhattan. The car descended into a private, subterranean garage, and an elevator took them directly up. The doors opened, not into a lobby, but into a living room, a penthouse. The entire wall was glass, overlooking Central Park, the lights of the city glittering like a carpet of diamonds. And he was there. Marcus Thorne. He was not Adam. He was wearing a dark, custom-knit cashmere sweater and grey trousers that cost more than her cottage. The wound was gone. The desperation was gone. In their place was an aura of such absolute power and control it was suffocating. He stood by the window, a glass of dark liquor in his hand, the undisputed king of his domain. "Sophie," he said. His voice was the same, but the context was all wrong. "Thank you for coming." "You didn't exactly give me a choice," Sophie said, the adrenaline of the night finally making her brave. employee tasered a man in my front yard. She used a weighted baton, Marcus corrected, turning to face her. Helen is efficient, and that man was not a man. He was a low-level enforcer for Robert Kincaid, the man who tried to kill me, and who, thanks to Sheriff Miller, now knows you were the one who helped me. So what now? She asked, clutching her bakery folder to her chest like a shield. You bought me a building. You flew me across the country. Am I your prisoner? A flicker of something, annoyance, regret, crossed his face. You are the only loose end, Sophie. The only person alive who can tie me to Osprey Cove. Kincaid is desperate. He's being investigated. His assets are frozen. He's a cornered animal, and he knows that I have a weakness. A weakness? Sophie laughed, a dry, bitter sound. You, the wolf, you don't have weaknesses. Marcus stepped closer. The cologne was the same. The intensity was the same. I didn't, until I spent 2 days on a floral sofa, being lectured by a waitress who was too stubborn to take my money. Kincaid thinks you're my person, my mistress, my something. He thinks he can use you to get to me. And can he? She asked, her voice small. He can use you to hurt me, Marcus said, his voice dropping. And I don't permit that. Which is why you're here. You need to disappear. New name, new life. I have an apartment in Switzerland, a house in Buenos Aires. You can have your bakery anywhere. He was offering to hide her, to erase Sophie Hayes. No, Sophie said. Marcus blinked. No? No, I'm not running. I'm not disappearing. You brought this to my home. Kincaid, Miller, that thug in my yard. This is your world, Marcus, not mine. But you dragged me into it, and you don't get to fix it by buying me a new life. Then what do you want, Sophie? He asked, clearly exasperated. I want to go home. You can't. It's not safe. Then make it safe. She shot back. You're Marcus Thorne. You're the wolf. You take down companies. You survive helicopter crashes. You win. So go win. Take down Kincaid. Take down the sheriff. You want to close the debt? Then fix this. Marcus stared at her, a long, searching look. She wasn't afraid of him. Angry, terrified of the situation, but not of him. She was the only person in his life who wasn't. And that's when Sophie remembered. The man in my yard, she said, her mind racing. He had a cufflink, a silver wolf's head. He said it was Kincaid's insignia. Marcus nodded. His personal affectation. He fancies himself an alpha. What about it? The cufflink, Sophie said, her blood running cold as the memory clicked into place. It was silver. A wolf. And I saw it before. Where? Marcus asked, his voice sharp. At the diner, Sophie whispered. On Sheriff Miller. The day after the storm. He came in for coffee. He was wearing French cuffs. He paid and I saw it. The cufflink. A silver wolf. I just thought it was a local thing. A team logo, maybe. But it was him. He wasn't just on Kincaid's payroll. He was part of the club. Marcus Thorne went very, very still. A slow, cold, terrifying smile spread across his face. It was not a smile of humour. It was the smile of a predator that had just been handed the key to the cage. A corrupt, small-town sheriff, Marcus said, his voice full of chilling satisfaction. Wearing his new master's crest, he didn't just tip Kincaid off after the fact. He was part of the plan before. He was the local spotter, Sophie realized. He was Kincaid's man on the ground, waiting for the crash. And you, Marcus said, turning to her, his grey eyes blazing with a new, terrifying energy, just handed me the smoking gun. You're not a liability, Sophie Hayes. You're a damn asset. He strode to his desk and slammed a button on his intercom. Helen, get me the Attorney General and find me the number for every reporter at the Wall Street Journal. The wolf is going hunting. Marcus Thorne at war was a sight to behold. From the gilded cage of his penthouse, Sophie watched him orchestrate the downfall of 2 lives with the casual intensity of a man ordering lunch. He was a spider, and Sophie's testimony was the final, fatal strand. Mr. Attorney General, Marcus said, his voice pure ice as he spoke into his phone. I believe I have your missing link. A witness who can tie Robert Kincaid's conspiracy directly to a corrupt local official. Yes, a Sheriff Miller in Osprey Cove. He was wearing Kincaid's personal insignia. He leveraged Sophie's testimony about the wolf cufflink, painting a picture of a vast conspiracy that the media, fed by his PR team, devoured. 2 days later, Sophie watched it unfold on his massive television, a split screen showing federal agents arresting a stunned Robert Kincaid at his mansion and a disgraced Sheriff Miller being cuffed in his own station. Marcus clicked the TV off. The penthouse was silent. It's done, he said. You're safe. You can go home. Sophie looked at the city lights, then back at him. No. She picked up the Dream Bakery folder. I'll accept your restitution, but not as a gift, as an investment, a business loan. I'm paying you back, Marcus, every cent, with interest. Marcus stared at her, the wolf momentarily taken aback by her spirit. A slow, genuine smile of respect touched his lips. He took a heavy gold pen, crossed out Anonymous Benefactor on the legal documents, and wrote, Monsieur Thorne, private investor. Get me your terms by morning, Miss Hayes, he said. My lawyers will be in touch. And that's the story of Sophie and the wolf. It started with a storm and a single act of kindness, and it just goes to show that you never know who might be knocking on your door. But what do you think? Was Marcus truly changed by Sophie's kindness, or is a wolf always a wolf? No matter what would you have done if a bleeding billionaire showed up on your doorstep? If you loved this story, and if you believe in the power of karma, make sure you hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this video with someone else who needs a story of drama and a little bit of justice. And most importantly, if you want more stories like this one, with twists, drama, and karma, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring that bell. We have new stories coming every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for listening.